Hello and welcome to From the Be All End, the Burnley podcast. This is the debrief for Preston North End 3, Burnley 0 in the FA Cup. It's not often we've convened to talk about a disappointing performance, but certainly disappointing is the word to describe the way in which we exited the FA Cup on Saturday at Deepdale. We'll get straight onto that and talk about where things went wrong. I'm Andrew Greaves, full pod squad in attendance tonight. Justin Connolly, Paul Woodhouse, Simon Evans and Chris Borden. Simon, let's start with you. We were all quite optimistic, weren't we, going into an FA Cup fifth round tie? We talked about being one game away from Wembley and we were on a decent run, playing some good football, back of the Sheffield Wednesday result. Where did it all go wrong? Did it go wrong an hour before kickoff when we saw that team sheet, do you think?
Yeah, it did.
Excellent, would it? No, no. Just to expand on that, because I think we're in agreement. We're in agreement, aren't we?
I mean, we all said that the thing we really hoped would happen was that he'd field a proper side and really go for it, because there's a quarter-final of the FA Cup place up for grabs and a really positive chance of getting to Wembley. And he didn't. He picked the reserve side. He picked the cup side, really, that we've played in previous rounds. And I must admit, when I saw that, I was really disappointed when I saw the team come out. But then I also reminded myself that actually I quite enjoyed that game against Reading, and we did all right against Southampton with that side. So I thought, okay, don't be a Debbie Downer. It might not be that bad, But in fact, at Reading, we really enjoyed it. We had an even weaker side out, really, with young lads in and playing much better. But that was against the League One side, wasn't it? And it just was nothing resembling the Burnley team we've seen this season in any way, shape or form, really. And it feels like we've thrown that game, really. It feels like, we've written it off. We've written it off and we've said, yeah, we're not that bothered about FA Cup, trip for Wembley, And I just think, it's all very well me sat here watching it on television in America and being disappointed about it. But there's people, 6,000 people have given up time and money and effort to go and watch that game and support the team. And I just feel it's a bit disrespectful to the fans, really, doing that. I'm really disappointed by what Scott Parker did.
Yeah, Woody, I mean, it's a bit of a kind of tradition, isn't it, that kind of some managers will play that same cup side. But, I mean, we're Burnley Football Club, aren't we? We're not Man City, we're not Liverpool, we're not, and I appreciate that kind of City squeeze past Plymouth and Liverpool are out of the cup at the hands of Plymouth. But, you kind of think to yourself, in the grander scheme of things, essentially 2 games away from Wembley, if we're going to start to take a cup run seriously, that's the time to do it and bring a couple more, even if it's not a full strength 11, you'd probably want a few more of those first teamers to feature, wouldn't you?
Yes. I mean, well, especially in hindsight, you would have put absolutely anybody in a part other than that shower of shit yesterday, because it's one thing getting beat, It's another thing not turning up, and it's another thing entirely not putting the required level of effort in. That wasn't a bad side that he put out yesterday. Yes, there's the argument about making sure that you put your full string in. There's absolutely no excuse for some of the shit that were going on yesterday, some of the seeming lack of effort, and yes, we've played shambolic at times this year, but that was shambolic with, the added non-effort, and it was just fucking appalling from start to finish. And there's no excuse for that. They should have been remotely up for it, and I don't know what went on, but it was fucking horrible. And yeah, there's no excuse for that. Whether Parker's got that wildly wrong, and maybe he has, but something was definitely off, and it was a shameful performance.
Yeah, and Chris, we'll perhaps go on to Preston North End, who I think do deserve quite a bit of credit for the way they approach the game. But I mean, as Woody said, I mean, it's kind of a lot of these players have been given a rare chance at starting. Everything just felt disjointed. It looked like they'd never played together. And I appreciate, a lot of that side have only played together probably once at Southampton in the last round. But the professional footballers, they train all week. Were you surprised at the lack of, I don't want to call it effort, perhaps in the same way as Woody, but, the lack of effort or intensity, the lack of, wanting that, that desire to want to show Scott Parker that he's making a mistake, not including them in this kind of really successful league side, if that's what we're going to call it?
Hitman's had the easiest weekend of his life because he won't need to wash shirts. Like what? No sweat on him. No, you think you look at the handshakes beforehand and they've shown solidarity with Hannibal, and then they've let Osmajic win the day in bulldozers and bulliers and I just don't. I mean, I know Worrell had a bit of a dig at him by the corner flag, which was nice, and I didn't think it was a free kick in any way, shape, or form. But we're 26 points better than them. And, there's a lot of press and rightly so, enjoying their moment because, bar Morecambe and Accrington, they're the only Lancashire side who hasn't played in the Premier League. I think we could throw Barrow in the mix as well, can't we now? But it's, rightly so, they're crowing. They've beaten a neighbour that spent an absolute fortune more than them comparatively. And you can wheel out the comparisons. But theirs was a team, and they made 4 changes as well. Some were forced upon them, some were, the manager's selection. But, they were a team, and we were a collection of strangers. And you could go all the way through them, from back to front. It was just pitiful, really. And like I say, you don't mind losing games of football; it's how you lose them. And I was having a bit of a debate and. On social media last night. I'm of the school of thought that over the summer, when Company left, and you look at the state of the squad and what's going to, how it's going to have to be overturned. I've always been of the thought all season that, you know what, if we have a good crack at promotion, I'll accept that. Mm-hmm. If they fall short, fine. Now, to my money, they're having a good crack at it. Now, if you're not going to get up, it's probably going to be conceived failure. So you want some sort of tangible success on that. Now, if you can get to a cup, if you can send 45,000 Burnley fans to Wembley Stadium for a cup semi-final that they've not been in, since 1974, that's a real memory to look back on that. And it's a season. It's like a red letter day in past seasons. Now, to put all your eggs in one basket, for me, heightens the pressure on achieving promotion now. And if you don't do that, it's a failure in my eyes. And I don't see why. I accept you're going to make changes. I don't see why you have to make as many as he did, knowing full well that they are going to be, they've nothing to play for. They're going to be bang at it. Now, you need to match them. You need players who can match their energy, physicality. You don't need tippy-tappy sort of players of your likes of. There's too many players of that ilk in there for me yesterday. In Sarmiento, Benson, and Koleosho. Koleosho did half all right, to be fair, in the first half. But you needed your Laurens in there. You needed probably your Cullens in there. Hannibal, even with all the sort of hullabaloo around that, you need someone who can win a tackle. Did we win a tackle?
I don't think we attempted, did we?
No.
I don't think we attempted tackles, did we?
We've not held the ball up all afternoon.
No.
Barnes won a couple of free kicks when he come on, and that was as good as it got. But it was just, like I said, they're 26 points behind us, and they're that way for a reason. And that's with a good home record. So that's held them up. They're not as good as that. And in 3 games, we've failed to score against them. And I'll go into work tomorrow and I'll get absolutely battered from all sides. And it's a strange feeling losing a game of football, isn't it? But it's to lose it in that manner, it could have sort of repercussions beyond this. The Pride of Lancashire we are. Well, we're not in my head at the minute. Not especially when I go to work tomorrow.
Yeah, and just been looking at the league table, obviously. We're 16 points inside the playoff picture. Blackburn Rovers occupying 7th with a 29-goal worse goal difference than us. We're 29 goals better off. You kind of think to yourself, don't you, that guaranteed the playoffs, man. I think me and Woody talked about this a couple of weeks ago when we did that little podcast with just the two of us. Now's the time you should be taking risks, If we want to be in that top two, and we've still got to play Sheffield United, so it's kind of, we've got some control over it. But can you see any reason why Scott Parker decided to make the 9 changes? I know we've got the game against Cardiff on Tuesday, but is now not the time when you go, look, we're going to finish top 6, right? So we're guaranteed that crack at promotion, which Chris has talked about. Were you surprised that he made so many changes? And would you have made as many changes as Scott Parker, given the league picture looking as it does?
Yeah, I mean, I think we expected some changes. I think we kind of talked ourselves into thinking we were going to have a real go at it, hadn't we? Because I think that's what we wanted. That's what the fans want. It's always, I mean, it's that performance and the result and the team selection were disappointing in so many ways. It's a shabby way to treat the competition. It's a shabby way to treat the fans. It's always really disappointing when a game like that, means something to us, means something to the fans, means something especially to those people who've paid good money to go and watch it. And it's always a letdown when the club doesn't seem to feel the game is as important as you think it is. Yeah. But again, there's. I've been scratching my head about it. To be honest, I've been thinking about this all day. Why do it? What's the purpose? I mean, clearly the club thinks promotion is more important than getting to the FA Cup quarter-final. Clearly, that's the reason to do it, isn't it? We've got a game midweek, so resting some players. Do they really need a rest now? I mean, that's what the squad's for in that regard, isn't it? To, drop a couple of players out here and there when you think you can get away with it and, against the weaker sides and rotate the squad a little bit. Protecting people against picking up injuries, maybe. But then Maxime Estev, who's arguably our most valuable player, plays the full 90 minutes. Yeah. Lucas Perez plays the full, did he play the whole game? I think he did.
I think he did, yeah. I don't think Perez came off, did he?
And he's like maybe our only fit left back at the moment, so that's not a reason. So basically we've taken a battering against, one of our fiercest rivals at a time when really we need that momentum to be maintained. And this has just deflated everybody's tyres, isn't it? So I just, you asked me why, would I have made so many changes? No, of course I wouldn't. I would have fielded the strongest possible team we could muster and try and batter them, and then that momentum, that feel-good factor for the fans, a possibility of going to Wembley, the players get to, dream about playing there and taking part in that. I don't. If the goal is to try and make it a better situation for potential promotion, that's backfired wildly, hasn't it? I mean, in my mind, it hasn't aided it. It's hindered it.
Yeah. And Simon, there were a couple of things I picked up on the comments from Scott Parker talking about, psychological and emotional and all of this, and that obviously refers to the Hannibal and Osmajic incident. We've already talked about kind of Hannibal. I think Chris mentioned, your Hannibals and your Laurents and things. I'd have thrown Hannibal. I actually think we managed the emotions of that game in completely the wrong way and handed the emotional initiative, if you will, to Preston. Now, Scott Parker will say, look, you're protecting a young player, which is what I think he said. But part of me thinks that we've drawn 0-0 twice. Let's take a box of fucking matches and blow the fucking place up. And by that, I mean you throw Hannibal in, because Higginbotham had no doubt whatsoever of throwing Osmajic in. Do you think Scott Parker got that decision? And we know Scott Parker's probably not an emotional, there's a great clip of him, I think he's Bournemouth manager, where he's doing a half-time team talk and he's talking about managing the emotions of situations and things like that. For me, as soon as I didn't see Hannibal on that team sheet, I kind of thought to myself, I don't think this is going to go the right way. because I felt that they'd handed the emotional initiative to Preston and allowed them to control that psychological, emotional narrative. What do you make of that decision not to play Hannibal? Because we were told Hannibal really wants to play. I think he said that in his pre-match press conference.
Yeah, I don't really understand it, to be honest. I mean, what was there a point being trying to be made about it? I mean, if the whole thing, if he said to him what is alleged, and this has been reported to the FA or the Football League and the disciplinary bodies to deal with, then we're in the business of standing up against racism, right? And do you do that by then backing down and not playing the player against the person who's allegedly made the racist comment? I'm not sure that's really standing up to racism, is it? So, I mean, I couldn't, maybe, if I'm being generous, sort of think that they were trying to avoid a conflict and it becoming another secondary incident that then gets investigated. The Hannibal, has got a reputation of having a hot temperament, and he might have got involved in incidents, got sent off, could have provoked incidents in the crowd. Perhaps, you could take all those kind of possible justifications for the decision. But if your whole point is we're reporting this, we're standing up, we're making a stance about racism, and by the way, we're not going to play this guy because you insulted him, I don't know. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. I might be missing something obvious there, but it just doesn't make sense to me. And I think as well, on a broader sort of thing about when you pick that team, you talk about psychology. I think when you, as a manager, announce a team lineup that is clearly second string, you can't help but be sending a message by doing that, even to the second string players who know they shouldn't really be starting. It says this match doesn't matter as much as the one last week and the one next week, doesn't it? That's the message, that you can't avoid that. You can't avoid that. So, there's a case for, resting 2 or 3, maybe, freshen it up with enough players on the bench that we've debated about whether you could start this guy on the left, this guy at 10, this guy at 9. There's enough options there. But to make wholesale changes like that, it sends a message that it doesn't really matter. This is of secondary importance. And the fact that we've gone out and played like that suggests that that was the case. A lot of money potentially lost as well. Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know what conversations have gone on. See, managers will say, I get judged on whether we get promoted or not. And it's my job that's on the line. And if we don't get promoted because we lost players or getting injured in a cup tie at Preston North End, then, that's me who's paid the price for it. I'm surprised there isn't a conversation there between the manager and the chairman, though. I mean, does the chairman realise what a potentially massive day Burnley going to Wembley could have been? I mean, it would have been huge for the club. Like Chris says, you remember these days forever. Yeah. Even if it were a semi-final defeat, you'd still remember that going down to Wembley, 40-odd thousand people and tremendous atmosphere and all that. And I just think maybe they didn't realise that for Burnley fans it was such a big deal. They're not Clarets, these people, are they? And Parker has only been at the club since the summer. Maybe they didn't quite appreciate that Burnley fans were really up for the idea of going to Wembley.
Yeah, Woody, I mean, it's an interesting point Simon makes there about Parker. I mean, Parker spent, most of Thursday's press conference, or a big chunk of it, talking about cup final day and, people feeding mints to police horses and following the coaches and the hotels and all of the nostalgic stuff that we all remember cup final day being, which is the best.
Playing Willie Thorne at snooker.
All of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it did feel like a complete misstep by everyone involved in terms of, so you know what? It beat Preston, and then Preston have gone on to get Aston Villa at home. And I think me and Chris had a bit of back and forth on the group saying, you know what, probably Villa would have beaten us, but, they're a good side. You'd have got the turf full for that, wouldn't you? One game away from Wembley, anything can happen. I remember when we beat Spurs 3-0 in the semi-final, got beaten after extra time after that, in that two-legged affair. But, Turf Moor raises its games for those kind of games, doesn't it? And you'd think to yourself, get through this Preston game. It's a team in our division. I think Chris or whoever said 26 points worse off than us. It just felt like a real misstep from start to finish, didn't it?
Well, that's kind of why I was surprised because Parker seemed to be, or he sounded like he was definitely an FA Cup romanticist, didn't he? He was saying all the things that everybody understands about the FA Cup, about those, it's an all-day event and all that kind of shit, and police horses and mints and all that kind of business. And, really, you really expected everybody who were arguably left in the competition of all the managers, he probably understood it as well as anybody. And having missed out as well in a semi-final, that, he would have wanted to go that step further. I wasn't expecting that performance yesterday from us, given what he'd said about it. You weren't anticipating such a limp effort. And so I don't quite get it. I mean, the only slight positive that I may take out of it is that, they're suitably chastened, and that it's one of those performances that you have to then make a statement about in your upcoming games. And that's about it, because there's really nothing to pull out from yesterday. We fucked it up from top to finish. And of course you're not going to expect the chairman or the board to understand what the FA Cup would necessarily mean. There's only a handful of people in that club that probably can spell FA Cup, but which is what I am still slightly staggered and still really quite annoyed, considering what Parker said, that it seemed to go as badly as it did.
Yeah, and probably one of the other positives is that our friend Bobby Ball had been in charge of the coaches for Wembley, so we've probably done ourselves got ourselves off the hook a little bit there in terms of putting someone like him in charge of logistics. So, but Chris, I mean, Woody mentioned there, obviously we've got a couple of games coming up Tuesday night, tomorrow night against Cardiff. It needs to be a reaction, doesn't it? I mean, I can't imagine we'll see many of that starting 11. Perez probably. We think Bashir Humphries is injured. There's been a lot of rumours about that. I'm sure he'll be back on the grass at some point. Maybe Estev. Well, definitely Estev. And then beyond that, really, you're struggling, aren't you? I mean, Foster played in the number 9, but you'd expect Fleming to come back in for him and Edwards to come back in for out on the left or out on the right with Anthony on the left. None of these players are going to get a chance in the league under Parker. Probably not even Josh Brownhill, who again wasn't, described the performance as embarrassing. He wasn't alone in going missing, was he?
Not at all. But again, like we're talking about with the rested players, and I know it's a different game. It's 15 years or so ago, but Graham Alexander missed 4 minutes of that season we were promoted in 2009. And bearing in mind, we got to the semi-final, a 2-legged semi-final of the League Cup. We got to the 5th round, where we exited at Arsenal and played playoff games. It was like 60-odd game season. And, a guy who was like 38, I think, at the time.
He was there, yeah.
Played all bar 4 minutes. And, Bashir Humphries has picked up an injury in training. You're going to pick up, it's God's law. I mean, any one of those players could pick up an injury on Tuesday night that's been rested. So you can't, you're like wishing things upon people. You just play them. If they've got a niggle, rest them. Fine, if you don't want to risk them. But if they're fit and raring to go, I mean, they would have wanted to play. That's the daft thing. Let's say Hannibal wanted to play, It's, that's the frustrating thing. But that's it. You've got to go to Cardiff now and proper set the bar now and go out, and you have to win the game. Pure and simple. From a chasing Sheffield and Leeds perspective, yeah, you have to. But just from putting a marker down after yesterday, after Saturday, you've got to go and win the game and justify all those changes to the Burnley fans. And I think, to be fair, I mean, it'll still hurt for a while. But I think if you go to Cardiff and win the game, get the 3 points, I think a lot of people will be feeling a damn sight better about things. Should that be the case? But it's why put yourself in that position? It seems a strange one to me.
Yeah, and Justin, a lot of managers do use kind of cut runs for momentum. I mean, I think Owen Coyle put the fact that we, got promoted, down to the fact that we went out in such cruel circumstances against Spurs in that semi-final of the League Cup. If we win at Cardiff and we then beat Luton, do we sit here next Sunday night when we're recording and go, you know what, actually, 6-point week or even a 4-point week, Sheffield United have dropped a point or two, and Leeds, who did drop points against West Brom, or is it one of those that actually we get to the end of the season, even if we do get promoted, we still go, you know what, on a season where we had a bit of ups and downs, that was a real kind of, a point that really pissed us off, that we didn't give the FA Cup 5th round tie a real good go.
Yeah, I think we do. I think we're still annoyed by it, even if we go up, because, like I say, I can't see any positive advantage to us doing that, and I think I don't think it's possible to say, we've got a better chance of promotion just because we played a weakened side in this game. I think that's a ludicrous argument.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, apart from anything else, we kind of. The only positive that comes out of that game really is that, the likes of Joe Worrell and John Joe Shelvey are nowhere near getting in the first team. We know that now.
Exactly.
And there's no conversation about that. But their sort of confidence levels will have dropped as a result of that. Now, we might need those players going forward. We might need to drop them in, even if it's just in fits and starts, substitution appearances. How does doing that to them help? How does dropping them into that situation for that one game and producing a performance like that help with it, all that stuff going forward? It can only have a negative impact, and I don't care if we go up or not. I still think it's a shoddy way to treat the competition and the fans. I still think it's overall negative on the shape of the season.
Yeah, I was looking at the Clarets ratings, and I have to say I can't remember seeing such low ratings. But let's just pick up one or two of them performances, Sam. And I mean, we might as well start with Shelvey and Worrell. I was surprised at how off the pace Worrell was. Now, we knew he had that kind of, airline fracture on his foot or whatever, but I mean, that really does expose a little bit of the problem we have at centre-half. If Humphreys is injured and Worrell's your man's coming. Now, we know Worrell's got a lot of experience, got promotion experience with Nottingham Forest, but were you surprised at how off the pace he was? Because, he to me, it looked like he was running through treacle every time he, was stepping forward.
Yeah, I mean, it was horrific, really, wasn't it, watching him? I mean, he was like a statue sometimes with their guys going past him. And, the bits we've seen of him, he's looked like this calm, composed, experienced old head who we can put in at the back. And you're now very nervous about him if he was starting, I mean, he's ended up in the Kevin Long role, hasn't he, really, as like this, eternal backup centre-half. But Kevin Long never let us down like that yesterday. I mean, that was shocking for him. And let's just, he's an experienced pro who's had a good, solid career. Let's just call that one an off day. Let's not, totally dismiss him. But he had a stinker. And I actually wondered if he was actually fit. I mean, which is bizarre.
That's what I thought. He looked like he was. I didn't think he looked 100% fit. Now, maybe he wasn't, but we had Egan Riley on the bench, so he was clearly fit to play. But
he did.
Does it expose our kind of January dealings? Because we let John Egan go, who I thought, he was the one who was getting on ahead of Worrell when these sub appearances were needed. And, of course, we let Ekdal go to Groningen. I noticed, again, he played 90 minutes for Groningen in Holland yesterday. It feels a bit like we kind of, let two players, very capable defenders, go. Arguably, we've always argued that Ekdal's probably, top two, if you will, in terms of talent. It just felt really weird, didn't it, Simon, in terms of, in hindsight, and hindsight's great, what we did in January, and we've been left with, somebody who's just regressed since those early days of the season.
Well, it feels like we're exposed now, doesn't it? I mean, you're thinking, like, if Egan Riley gets a nod, that's our starting central defensive pairing.
Yeah.
if Humphrey's not around to slot in there. So that is alarming. John Joe Salvi was like a sort of, a bald-headed version of Jan Molby, late career Jan Molby, just sort of strolling around the centre circle and he just wasn't putting it in, was he? And
he was more like a late career me, if you ask me.
And we know what he can do, and he's shown us bits of what he can do. We know that range of passing, especially the long balls he can ping, is fantastic. But he just wasn't. He's obviously not in shape. He's not fit yet. Barnes didn't even get on until the 70th minute or something like that, was it? Well, after the hour mark, anyway. In a game like that, says for itself. And then we don't want James Trafford getting injured either. That's the other thing I come away from that game. I know you disagreed, but on that free kick, I thought he was like badly out of position for that one, and he just didn't exactly exude confidence at any stage in the game either, really. So, didn't think Son, who looked good the first time we saw him, he didn't impress at all. Maybe we can just write it off as one of those abysmal team performances where no one's going to look good, because no one did. But alarming, really. Koleosho, like Chris said, he put himself about a bit and did a few things, but my God, he's fallen down, hasn't he? From a player who was like terrifying Premier League defences a year ago, and now he's looking like well down the pecking order.
Yeah, definitely. I have to say, I chatted to Phil Bird this morning at football, and he was of your opinion, Simon. Phil is a goalkeeper, and he also felt that Vlasky was basically offered him 75% of his goal to aim at, and that was where Brady was going to win.
It still had to be a brilliant free kick from Brady to do it, but he basically invited him to do it because he went so far across.
Yeah, definitely. And Woody, looking at kind of the dynamics of what we saw in terms of the lineup, I think Chris or Simon said right at the start, a few too many of those tippy-tappy players. We've kind of wanted to get off our seats and wanted these wingers and exciting players to get in. But that system that Preston played, where they just harried and bullied and didn't let Benny settle, didn't let Koleosho settle, that's almost the blueprint for dealing with, that tippy-tappy football that we've cried out for. And Scott Parker keeps telling us he wants to play into that. A few teams in the Championship might start looking at that, and albeit, yes, the personnel will be different with Anthony and Edwards, you'd think. But, the problem with a defeat like that is teams do learn something about how to combat your playing style, don't they?
Yeah, and sides, it hasn't just been this year. Sides have been able to do it for a couple of years. But if you look at all our particularly poor performances, they've always come against sides such as Preston. We haven't had a really good performance against Preston out of these three games. It's those who have got in as grills, those who have pushed up against us, those who have pressed against us, those who don't let us play and bully us a little bit. Every single side that's done that to us, we've really struggled against. And so when you don't put the composite effort in behind it, you get performances like Saturday. Yeah. And if you throw in a couple of decent goals out of nothing almost, then you get the kind of results as per Saturday. I think it was Simon that mentioned it. The performance such as Saturday is more along the lines of relegation form. If we'd had a few of these 0-0s turned into, performances such as that and results such as that, we're looking at a very different season. And I think this is probably what has wound quite a lot of people up over the course of the season. And, we've still got a few games to sort this out, but it could look very, very different towards the end of the year, dependent on how we react to this and how we finish things off. Because we're better than that, but we could wind up doing not much better than that as well.
Yeah, and I think just before we go, Chris and Justin, let's just have a, turn his attention a little bit to Preston. I was quite impressed with them. Certainly Kessler Hayden, who's the young lad who's on loan from Villa, Chris. If you are a Burnley recruitment, you're sat there in the recruitment department. Are you looking at him and going, you know what, actually as a player who can play full-back and centre-half, I know we probably didn't test him quite as much, but I've been quite impressed with him every time I've seen Preston. You know, they've got a couple of players, haven't they, there? And Heckingbottom, I think they've got a good home record. I don't think they've lost at home since mid-November. What did you make of Preston as a team and Kessler Hayden? I'm just interested to get people's opinion on the Villa lad.
Kessler Hayden, I think Villa see him as maybe Matty Cash's success. I think his future very much lies at Villa Park. He's been excellent across. He was excellent at Turf Moor in the Nilla piece, to be fair to him. But they're a funny side, Preston. I think there's only 3 sides. Sheffield have won there on opening night. They've lost to Bristol City bizarrely, which was a bit of a catalogue of errors. And Arsenal won there in the League Cup. So they've shown what they're capable of. Now, conversely, how are they going to get on against Sheffield United in a couple of weeks? Are they going to do us a favour, or are they going to revert to North End of that we've become accustomed to, sort of mid-table, below mid-table North End? To my mind, Heckingbottom has been a vast improvement on Ryan Lowe, and I think had he started the season, they should have potted Lowe in the summer and should have brought someone in with his own players and his own ideas, and Heckingbottom will need to go again in the summer, but he's got the bones of something there. Reese will be on his way. And so God knows what's going to happen to Osmajic. If he's suspended, they may wish to sort of do away with him altogether and start again from a centre forward point of view. But Brady, we all know. I've been sort of. My boss is a North End fan. I've always sort of looked at how Robbie Brady's done at Preston because he was such a gifted player. Just besieged with injury at Burnley. And I've always raved about his, from dead balls, I don't care how fit he is, dead balls, he's as good as anything. And I disagree with, if you look at Gladkey, he's not sort of off, his weight's not off to one side, to his right. He's already started going towards his left. It's the wall side, and it's just Brady's brilliance. So he does steal a few yards, to be fair, from the free kick, but it's Brady's brilliance that does that. But let's see how they get on against Sheffield. Can they repeat that? So if they can do, they might do us a massive favour.
Yeah, we've seen Preston North End 3 times this season. They do play as much as we hate to give local rivals credit. I mean, the way they play with Osmajic is what we've been crying out for, isn't it? Kind of going direct and getting a player who's willing to bully defenders and be on the shoulder last defender. I mean, the way he wandered through to take his goal was, shocking from our point of view. But, I don't think we've got a striker who would make that run and wander in and then, be able to put it past the keeper with such kind of calmness, if you will, that Osmajic brings. So for all that he is the pantomime villain, and rightly so, given what we think happened in the Deepdale League game, were you impressed, or was there anything you could take from the way Preston played, where you kind of went, you know what, if we played a bit like that, some of them 0-0ers against some of the lesser teams earlier in the season might not have been 0-0 and we might have snatched a 3-pointer?
Do you know what, Gracie? I couldn't care less. I couldn't give 2 shits about Preston North End. All I will say about them is a more hateful and unlikable bunch of footballers you will never see collected on a football field anywhere else.
What an incredible way to end. There you go, you see. I thought, set that up as a really intelligent, tactical discussion. But I think, to be fair, given the performance on Saturday, that is probably the perfect way to end.
Well, Keane's a lovely lad. His twin brother is a very nice lad, as we know. And his father-in-law, for some Burnley fans will be aware, his father-in-law is Adrian Heath, who we all know and love in this parish. But to be fair, I've met him in some capacity, the North End lads, and there's some good lads there, to be fair. But we'll wait and see what happens with this FA
Excellent. I love Chris coming in there to save us having to ring the lawyer up to see whether we have to qualify what Justin said there. So Justin thinks one thing, Chris thinks another. I think me, Simon and Woody will probably stay out of that argument. That's it for this week. We will be back on Thursday. Don't forget the Clarets play tomorrow night at Cardiff. Hopefully on Thursday we'll be debriefing a positive result in the Welsh capital and looking ahead to another big game at Turf Moor on Saturday. Luton Town, get this, 3 p.m. kickoff on a Saturday, the first 3 p.m. Saturday kickoff at Turf Moor since December 21st, I think. That'll be March 8th. So until then, enjoy your week and up the Clarets.
I'm enough with the fucking moaning.
Not going anywhere. I've never been happier, only to wake up in a whole different world.